Task 1 is the very first task which has been created. It was in 1993. Initially, it was a task dedicated to communication. But what is communication? It was about informing what's happening in the PV market. And it derived over time into a task focusing on the trends in the PV market. What's happening in the market, what's happening in the industry, which are the policies driving the PV market. And that's what Task 1 is about today. It's some kind of a think tank that analyzes, discusses, and forecasts what can happen in the PV market and in the industry in the coming years. We have seen in the last 10 years a significant development of PV installations in the entire world. We have seen the market multiplied by a factor 12, 15, and it will continue to grow by a factor 5 to 8 in the coming 10 years. And this is something which is absolutely necessary to fight against climate change. We need 3 terawatts of PV installations per year during the coming decades in order to be able to produce electricity in the most flexible and decarbonized way possible. And if we look at the history of PV installation, we had already such a multiplication of the market because of the intrinsic competitiveness of PV. And what's going to happen in the coming years is that that competitiveness will continue to drive the development of PV, and we will reach at some point levels which couldn't have been imagined in 1993 when Task 1 started. What is interesting in emerging markets is that there is a real need for cheap electricity in order simply to drive development. And we see that in addition to policies, the question of financing is extremely important. The competitiveness of PV is already a given. If we're looking at how PV electricity can compete with conventional sources of electricity in emerging markets, it's pretty straightforward. PV is already, with or without batteries, more than competitive with diesel generators. And what we will see in the coming years is PV taking such a market share in developing countries that it will become the main source of electricity in many countries. The regulatory environments are definitively something which are country specific. What we have seen in Europe, where PV development started, it was a willingness from the government to make PV competitive, and they gave all sorts of incentives. We see in other parts of the world now that while competitiveness is granted, we need other kind of policies. And these policies are very often linked to specific financing or to finance PV projects in countries where the financial stability can be an issue, but also which are the policies to ensure the adoption. And one of the clear elements that will be key in the coming years is making sure that the development of grids, especially in developing countries, will follow the rapid adoption of PV. If we're looking at the way our PV competitiveness improved over time, it came from 2 different factors. The first one, which has driven the evolution of PV prices down, is economies of scale. But now that economies of scale have been reached, it's technology that will drive prices down. And when we are talking about technology, it's higher efficiency, less consumption of materials, and in general, any kind of technology improvement in the manufacturing process that will allow prices to continue going down, while, as I was saying in the beginning, economies of scale have been reached and will not contribute massively to price reduction. I think the wealth of diversity inside Task 1 is something which is hard to be found in other organizations. And we see that depending on the countries, depending on the regions of the world, we have different views on how PV should be adopted. And Task 1 allows comparing what has been done badly or well in some countries and to avoid repeating mistakes. One thing that happened 10, 15 years ago in many European countries when we started developing massively PV is that the same policy mistakes were done one country after the other because simply policymakers didn't want to look at what was successful or not in other countries. And now here we have people from major markets around the world with different perspectives, different views, and the possibility, and it's something unique, to gain from the experiences that have been done in the last 20 years and this is something that only PVPS, thanks to Task 1, allows, and we are really proud of having that possibility to support policymakers and to accelerate PV development.